and Asylum for facilitating this. I had originally, the thought just popped into my head when all of this started happening, and I was getting text. I got a text from my friend Frank London, who was just like, I just lost all my gigs. And, I immediately knew that that was happening everywhere to so many people in my community. And I just thought people might be interested to hear about things that they can do during the downtime. So, my initial hunch was kind of backed up by the comments, which I really appreciate people leaving. I kind of wrote them all down and have them here in terms of what people wanted to learn about. Because what I didn't hear people saying was like, what we can do now in this moment. It was more general knowledge, which was my initial impulse, was like, oh, I can help people like do social media. So if you're sitting at home and recording a new single, you'll get it out on social media. If, God willing, in not that long, you'll be promoting the tour that got postponed and not canceled, you'll promote that as well. Because I don't think the general philosophy and skills are really any different. But I do know that there are acute needs now for musicians to like maximize the income they can earn and things like that. My record label and many others and many other artists were involved in this great Bandcamp thing that happened on Friday, where people could, where Bandcamp was forgoing their percentage. And by about 1 p.m., Bandcamp was overwhelmed, I guess, with traffic, and the site shut down for several hours, which originally was disappointing, but then it's like, oh, wow, people are really supporting music. Artists are out there promoting it. That's great. And through Chant, we were able to get some extra money for artists, because we did a thing where we gave people the ability to, well, Bandcamp has the ability, but donations were given to artists as well, which hopefully was a small help. I realize it's not going to make up for, like Leah said, her tour, and all the other people said all these gigs, and Brian losing 55 gigs in one day. I mean, that's devastating. So I realize this is not a solution, but it can hopefully be something to help a little bit. And I did go through all the comments. Hopefully I'll address as many of them as possible. So first of all, in the chat, I think it's the first comment, I posted my little Google Sheets presentation. I'm going to try sharing my screen now, because I think it's good to have that outlined organizationally, and it will keep me from running my mouth too much on any one topic, so I can get from the beginning to the end. This is a 2-part workshop. I estimated how much we could do in the first part, and I do want to leave time for questions. Rebecca and I had talked about a half an hour at the end, so it's now 10:22. So I'll try to condense everything into that 40 minutes so we can leave the time at the end. Okay, so the link is there, and if you can't see it, just put in the chat that you can't. But I think now I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to go to the presentation, which is here. And I hope everybody can see that okay. Is that? Okay, great. I'm seeing thumbs up. Trying to navigate this too. And then I have my printed notes. So we'll see how many things I can keep my eyes on at the same time. Okay, so let's go through. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. So we did this. You know what, I think for the purposes now, I'm gonna skip kind of the more in-depth introduction. I'll tell you that like I'm 40, I'm almost 46. I've done lots of different things in music over the years since I was a teenager, starting professionally to do music. Where I am now is I have 3 kids. I have a full-time day gig. And I consider myself a full-time, not consider myself, I'm also a professional musician and label owner, but consider that full-time also. So needless to say, like, I think somebody asked about, I think Ilya asked about time management. So that's like a particular, area that I have thought a lot about, because I have a very limited amount of time, but I've also, I can say I've been able to do a lot between the label, touring with my bands, having a it's not technically a full-time gig, but it's essentially a full-time gig. Anyway, my day gig, coincidentally, is in technology and design and media. So there's a ton of overlap, and I've been able to learn a lot from each area and bring it to the other. And I feel like my perspective as a musician has given me especially a window into technology and audience development and how those things work. And there's really such an overlap with music. So I'll leave it at that. I'm just looking through my notes to make sure I get everything together. Okay, so let's jump right in. This workshop is meant to be, as much as possible, a really kind of surface level survey of what I see as what I'm calling the how and the what of what independent musicians should be focusing on now. Like I said, a lot of it applies to the current situation, but more generally as well. And just, to go over kind of like the first things that I thought we should talk about is like how it used to be and how it is now. Now, I think people know all of this, but it's good to keep in mind and to be aware of what I think is a really complete flip in the model for how music is done at every level, and in particular ways for independent, what we're calling uncompromising artists. And that is by definition somebody who, has like a small niche, whatever that is. I mean, everything is a small niche now. In a way, everything has kind of come to us, in terms of like big artist album sales are way, way down. And now we're like, how does it feel to, work your butt off for 2 years and sell 5,000 albums? We've known that forever, but now they're learning it also. So just to go very briefly through what kind of was the old music paradigm, there might be some musicians young enough that you never saw this. It was exactly what was happening as I was coming up. And just as I moved to New York City in 2000 and then started working with John Zorn and Sodic Records with a few different bands for the next 10 years, was falling apart and switching over to the new paradigm, which is still unfolding, every day. But just generally speaking, the old music paradigm was everything I listed here. There's a high cost of album production in a professional studio. Everybody is kind of gunning for a major label contract. Even avant-garde artists, you look at people like I mentioned, Zorn, Ornette Coleman, people who are really uncompromising artists, but still working with major labels or major label imprints. Everything was geared towards album sales. So tours, even for small musicians, you did a tour to support an album. That's what you would say. You go out on the road to sell records. And that was kind of like what everything came from. And tours, I still don't understand how this works. This worked. It doesn't matter for us. But these huge tours, they used to lose money. Like Metallica would lose money. I don't understand. How can you fill Madison Square Garden and lose, like, somebody's taking something off the top? But anyway, that's what it used to be. But they would make up for it in album sales. Also, this concept of gatekeepers. So a label is a gatekeeper. Rolling Stone is a gatekeeper. Any media outlet that you want to go to is a gatekeeper. And avant-garde experimental artists were like in a distinct disadvantage there, because we're already like, the gatekeepers don't care about us because we have a limited number of fans. Also the way, and maybe Rebecca can be the barometer of this. If you go like this, I'll like slow down because I like get going and I talk really fast. That might be well suited for this type of workshop. But if I need to slow down, just go like that. Music fans own recordings. They're physical objects in this old paradigm. So everything to me kind of seems in that old model to be one-dimensional. You want to get on a major label, you want to sell as many records as you can, and so on. So you have this kind of elite group of artists, and everybody else is kind of on the outside of that. And so there's very few artists with a high level of fame and money. That's the old model. Now, you have people who I consider to be my role models. People like Ani DeFranco and Fugazi are always the two people, because they're artists, they're label owners, they did things on their own terms. They were by far the anomaly, and now they're kind of like our musical grandparents as far as like how this new model works. Also, the model then, or the goal, was like everybody just wanted to do music. I don't want to worry about publicity. I'm not going to write my own press release. I'm just going to do music. Okay. So needless to say, all of that's gone. But just to set the stage for what it was, and then to move on to the new music paradigm, is everything is flipped. You can make an album in your bedroom, basement, You can make it in your bathroom if the bedroom and basement aren't available. Maybe people living with roommates who are negotiating, making recordings now are doing that. That is very much a ubiquitous way that people are making records. And we all know, big studios that are closing and that have closed. Labels, the bigger labels have gotten smaller, and most of the labels that exist now are very small, like my label, like the label Scott runs, like other things. And also, you don't need a label. You can pretty much do everything that a label does on your own through these things that I'm going to be talking about. So one result of that is there's no standardized barometer of success. And that's one thing I want to reiterate, is that I feel like what I can offer in this workshop, to be most honest about it, is from my own experience. So I'm going to tell you in this workshop if there are things that I don't have experience with. But that's also indicative of how everything works now. Like, there are some musicians across all genres who make the majority of their income, and their main way of releasing music is a weekly YouTube video. Okay, I don't do that. So there are particular strategies to that I don't know. But I do know the basic philosophy that I've developed and that I have shared with many people and gotten feedback on will help in any situation. And the platforms are not that different, but they have all their particulars. Fans nowadays may or may not own recordings. Chances are they don't. Streaming has replaced ownership, even ownership in the form of a download. We'll get into that. So now it's, I say, sort of multidimensional, because it still is about success, but success is much more able to be individually defined. Like I said, there are musicians whose primary focus is like little Instagram videos or YouTube videos, or like Patreon, which is a crowd funding, a sponsorship model, which we'll talk about in the next workshop next Wednesday. And now there are so many artists out there who have a very low level of fame and money, which is good and bad. And fame, I'm not saying that with any value judgment. I'm just saying fame. How many fans do you have? How many people know about you? The most avant-garde composer who can do a tour in Europe has a level of fame. I just mean that in terms of notoriety. And you have, I think, musicians who are the most successful based on any definition of what that success is. They are able to do the business side of it in a smart and efficient way. I always think back to Bill Evans, a famous quote from pianist Bill Evans. And he said, in terms of like, he was asked somewhere, I don't remember where it was, but like, how did you get hooked up with Miles Davis? And he said, I just played the piano. I could have been playing in a closet. This is literally his quote. I could have been playing in a closet and Miles would have found me. That may be true for Bill Evans. And I'm sure he was actually playing gigs and Miles heard of him. That's not true anymore. You can't just do music. So, that was the realization that got me into the business. I've always been into it because it's interesting to me. I used to, when I was in high school, we used to like go to Kinko's and photocopy, little flyers to give out at basement concerts and things like that. Because where I come from is kind of like an indie music, punk rock background, DIY, getting somebody's basement or a garage and having a show and things like that. So that's very much the model. So that's the paradigm. And let me just check in, just if people could give like a thumbs up or a wave. Is this, you can hear me and this is so far so good? Okay, great. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so let's go on. So let me just see what time it is also. Okay, so one thing I will say, and I don't really know a nice way to say this, but I'll just be honest with you. A lot of musicians complain about the new model. And I understand that there are good and bad things about it. There are some things that are really bad about it, like the royalty payments from Spotify are horrible. Nobody thinks that's good. And Spotify is arguably ripping us off every day. But in my opinion, that's the reality. If you want to go up against Spotify, like some artists have, more power to you. But to me, that takes time and energy away from what we do as artists. And I'm much more of a use the system to beat the system kind of person and use it in any way that we can. That doesn't mean you have to be on Spotify, If you're not on it, then make the most of not being on Spotify. Tell everybody that you're not on Spotify and that you're doing this instead, and get them to sign up for your story based on that. And I'll just say, and I'm gonna pause because this is how I think. Like, anecdotes and stories to me, which we'll get into storytelling because that's really like the number one thing in this whole thing. To me, always resonates. So my favorite person who like uses the system to beat the system is Henry Rollins. So whatever you think about his music, writing, politics, I don't even know, but he's got such an amazing work ethic, and he takes every gig that comes, whether it's a voiceover in a cartoon or a commercial, and he is using it to put out great stuff. I don't even know how much music he does anymore, but he's putting out books and things like that. So that to me is a role model. Ani DeFranco is the same way. She's always stuck out. Now, truthfully, I haven't followed her in a long time, but how she went about her business and everything was that she would use what was available to her. So don't waste your energy complaining about things unless you're going to, become a lawyer and try to take down Spotify. And hey, I'll sign up for your mailing list if you do that. But that's not me. And I have a feeling that's not most of the people on this call right now. Another thing generally is that there are no tricks or shortcuts. There's no one big thing that you have to do. It's every day, just like we do with our music. It's every day. It's a practice. It's 1,000 little things that you do. Another thing I'll say, like the whole concept of virality, I've thought a lot about it. Current health situation aside, and certainly no pun intended, the thing of like a viral video, a viral meme, a viral this, a viral that, it should not be anything that we ever think about. If you do something that happens, fine. I'll tell you that a good friend of mine, Zach Mayer, who's a musician in Boston, who's also in my band, he's a baritone saxophone player. He had this video on YouTube of playing, he was on a subway and there, I don't remember how it was, but there was like a busker on the other end of the subway, or maybe it was him, and they ended up seeing each other and coming from either ends of the subway and like jamming together on the subway. And it was very cool. It was very sweet. It was about like connection in a big city. This was like years ago. It got like 9 million hits on YouTube. That's awesome. I can tell you from him telling me it didn't do anything for his career. It was cool. It was fun. The music was good, but it's not really anything. It's nothing, especially for us. So just putting that out there. Because sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, maybe this will go viral. Well, it doesn't matter. So a lot of this, anything that's coming across as criticism is also me saying that to myself. So I constantly have to remind myself, like, you're wasting your energy complaining about this. It's not going to do anything. So now we can get into the how of this whole thing, of the approach that I think musicians and artists should have. And then we'll get into the what. So just to look ahead a little bit, I'm going to do as much of this as I can in the next 20 minutes, but probably next week, which is April 1st at the same time. But as Rebecca told me, the daylight savings, whatever it is, it might be a different time for you, depending on where you are in Europe or Israel. So it's going to be next Wednesday at 10 a.m. New York City time. So I thought we could go through these like foundational principles, and then, which is the how, the approach to anything and everything that we do, business, music, etc., and then go deeper into like digital distribution, sync licensing, which is what many people asked about, which is a big interest of mine, crowdfunding, other resources, promotion and publicity. So, okay, so the first one is absolutely number one. What you're doing as a musician, what you're doing when you send out a press release, what you're doing when you send out a tweet, what you're doing when you take a selfie with your instrument in your hand in your basement, like I do all the time in here. I'm lucky that my basement has a little bit of light because I spend a lot of time down here. Everything you're doing is telling a story. And everybody has a story. And everybody's story is unique. And that sounds like some kindergarten thing, but it's really true. And you have to, the more you can be aware of what your story is, the more you'll be able to communicate that, and the more you will find people who resonate with your story. And I can't say enough to the musicians out there. In my opinion, and this is a pretty strongly held opinion, we want to hear your music. We want to hear about you, about your story. I don't want to hear that you compose music in odd time signatures. I don't want to hear that you, use a combination of James Brown and Giannis Xenakis with like a Tuvan throat singing, person who can sing in 9 octaves. Now that actually would be cool if you actually did that, but tell me the story behind that. Don't tell me the things that musicians geek out about, like your software or something like that. That's not relevant to people. Make that music and make it as strong and unique as possible, but tell me the story behind it. Obviously, if you're doing an interview or if you have like a particular, like if you're in Modern Drummer magazine, they might want to know what kind of kick drum pedal you use. I don't care about your kick drum pedal. I don't care how many strings your guitar has. I want to hear about, your relationship ended and you spent a month in a cabin in the woods. I'm remembering the story of, oh gosh, somebody put it in the chat. I can't remember who it was. His big album, he's got a beautiful voice. You might know who I'm talking about. He had a breakup. He went into an cabin in the woods in some Montana or something in the snow, and he made this album. Hold on. Somebody just chatted. Hold on. Oh, Bon Iver. Yeah. Yep. Totally. Exactly. And you knew the story once I said it, right? So that's what it is. His music is beautiful, but like, oh, wow, that's like a heartbreaking story. You got to tell the story and try to be aware of the story in everything that you do. Like I said, the story's there for you to be discovered, whether it's the story of your band, of the album, of your label, of the rehearsal that almost got canceled, or, whatever, things like that. So I'm just going through. Okay, so here's another thing that to me is, I think about all the time. And I'm just going to put it out there for thought, because most of you have probably heard the quote, but I think about it all the time with this, which seems to kind of contradict what I just said, but it's not actually. It's the quote that art is a lie that tells the truth. So to me, what that means is when you see a great musician, when you see a great film, that's all a construct. That's all, a painting is it's not real. It's not real life. So in that sense, it's a lie. It's kind of harsh. I think this is a quote from Pablo Picasso that's been repeated numerous times. But it's like, to me, I would say art is a story that tells the truth. Whether it's fictional or not, it doesn't matter. It's a story of like, the White Stripes. Are they brother and sister? Are they husband and wife? Did they break up? Did they get back together? Why is everything black, white, and red in every, in all their early albums? Like, that's a lie. They sat with an art director and they picked out their outfits on purpose. But you see that and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. They're these like hipster punks, and she's like real mysterious, and she's like not even a drummer, but she's also the greatest drummer ever because she's so raw. And he's like a furniture upholsterer guy, which I think is true. And like, who are these people? Like, it makes me want to hear them. So I'm going to move on, but I could spend a whole hour talking about storytelling. It's all about storytelling. Okay. So here's the next thing. And I have to give a shout out to most of you. You may or may not be aware of Seth Godin. He's like a marketing guy. He has like a big famous TED Talk. Might come across as kind of slick and disingenuous. I find him very genuine, even though he's got kind of a sheen to some of the things that he does. This is a huge concept, especially for us. Everything that we do is not, our music, our art, our story is not for everyone. You should never think that it's for everyone. It's for specific people. That doesn't mean a value judgment, they're bad and we're good. Although if that's part of your story, embrace it. I do that a lot with Chant Records. Oh, those people, they only care about pop music. We know what real music is. So here's this cool thing I'm going to tell you about. You shouldn't focus on criticizing other people, but like, you can work that into your story, that this is for this little secret group of people. So it has to be small, because that allows you to tell the story in a strong way. And if 99% of the world hates what you do, you're bigger than the biggest pop star because nobody has a 1% of the world that's into what they do. For us, it's like 0.00001%. But those people will be into what you're doing, and they will really need what you do. And I've been really humbled as an artist. For somebody wrote me a message. I was actually doing a gig in Germany a couple years ago, and I woke up and I got this message on my phone that this guy was going through a hard time and my music helped him. And I'm like, wow, like that's really humbling. Like, who am I to do that? But that's what we do. People need what we do, especially now. They really do. And I can go on and on about that, but many times in the last few weeks, as I'm like in my basement and totally stressing out, I put on like, you know, who knows, a Keith Jarrett album, and like it really calms me down and makes me feel connected, even though we're all not connected now in many ways. So you have to embrace what makes you weird and unique, and look for the people that can help you, and to be part of your community, which we'll talk more about community in a bit. But viability is important also. It's not like you want to find the one person who is going to do everything. It's not that. If you need 1,000 people to buy your album to break even, you got to find those 1,000 people. So it has to be viable, and you have to define what that viability is. But just like we're forgetting about virality and having a viral this or that and a million people liking you and streaming you and stuff, go for the people who matter, who need what you do, and who are part of your community. Those are the people that are going to really help you and give you what you need, and vice versa. I'm going to tell one story about this also. And I'm trying to keep these stories to a minimum, but you know, like I said, this is what I think. My first record for Exotic Records, John Zorn was producing it, and I was like really like anxious and starstruck around him, which, full disclosure, I still am 20 years later, but this was the first time. And I'm like, we were talking about the sequencing of the music on the record. Actually, sorry, this is when we were mastering the record. We had recorded it, but we were talking about what song to put first. And whether you're familiar with him or not, it doesn't matter, but he's a master of sequencing on records. He can hear a song and say, that's number 7, and it's right, and it's unbelievable. He heard the music and he said, put your craziest, weirdest, most obnoxious song first. And I was a little bit dumbfounded. I was like, no, I want to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And people who like, you know, Balkan music will have something in the first song, and people who like jazz will have something in the second song, and people who like traditional Jewish music in the fourth song, and then the real like punk rockers will like the fifth song. He said, no, what makes you crazy, what makes you weird, what makes you unique, put that first. It'll weed out all the people who aren't going to like you, and you'll get the strong, you know, you'll get your strongest support. And that's what this is. It's about smallest viable audience. So think about that as it pertains to everything. I don't care how many Instagram followers you have. If you have 100 followers and they're super into what you're doing, that's better than 1 million who don't even care and they just, you know, scroll through whatever. Okay. Okay. Technology is your friend. That's the only way I know how to put it. I come from the generation, like I said, I'm about to turn 46. I didn't grow up as a digital native. And I see I'm kind of getting, wow. Maybe should we go to like 11:10 and then do questions? Okay. So I apologize if I'm running on, but I'll just say for this, because I at least want to get through this part, and then I can briefly go through the next section. I'm not what they call a digital native. My kids are. They were born, you know, as much as I try to limit their screen time, they know how to use technology. They know how to do all that stuff. Either way, technology is a tool to accomplish a goal. It's not an end in and of itself unless you're a programmer, which is great. Thank God for the programmers out there that do all the stuff that we'll never know how to do. But I'm just looking at my notes here. It's the same as like, you know, something to make your music, like software or an effects pedal, as it is for like, for example, TweetDeck, which is a platform run by Twitter where you can schedule your tweets ahead of hand. It's only there as a tool to do what you need it to do. And we'll get into that more as we go along. And that technology should serve you. It should be user-friendly. Whether or not you know how to code, we'll get into this when I talk about what you need on the website. Whether or not you know how to code, the world in 2020 exists that you should be able to find a platform where you can have a website and that you don't have to be a computer programmer. If you do, then pick a different platform, because somebody made something that is made for you and somebody in your situation. You may have to compromise a few things, but what I'm saying is that as a regular person, you should be able to use technology as a tool to use what you need to do with not that much knowledge or feeling overwhelmed or anything like that. And that goes for everything. Okay. Build and serve a community. This goes for every aspect of what you're doing. I'll give a little anecdote because we're not going to get to it today. With sync licensing, the successes that I've had with music licensing and contacting people and getting some placements, it's been overwhelmingly through people who I already know or people who they know, networking, community, but it's a lot more than networking. It's actually building a community in everything that means. Artists, a community of other artists, community of your fans, speaking to them individually, valuing what they bring to you, things like that. But it's really, really, really important. And also the concept of being of service to a community is like, in a word, it's what I'm doing right now. I didn't plan on doing this workshop, but I woke up and I said, well, I know all these musicians, people I'm friends with through Asylum or Chant, people I know and don't know, but those are my people. This is my community. So what can I do with my experience to serve them? I'm just gonna, off the top of my head, Jessica Lurie is a phenomenal composer and multi-instrumentalist. Every time I have a rehearsal or performance or go out to dinner with her, she tells me, oh, you know what? I just met somebody who you should contact. He's a guy in France and he does a avant-garde Jewish music festival. How did I never hear of this person? But she knows him and she's like, I'm going to introduce you guys. She's always, she doesn't need to do that. She's a tremendous musician. She's a band leader. She's a side musician, whatever. Every time I see her, she mentions something else that I met somebody, I mentioned them. That's serving a community. She just has that in her brain that she's going to help people. And she does. So like years ago when she's like, hey, I'm going out of town. Can you babysit my cat? Or whatever, cat sit my cat. She's my friend. And of course I would do it. But I'm like, of course, Jessica's one of the most helpful, warm people I know. Of course, I'll go take care of your cat. Of course. So that's what community is. Okay. Okay. Here is the kind of method for the process of everything that I do, music and business. You do something, you see if it works, you tweak it, and then you go in a circle and you do it again. And a lot of this stuff is common sense. It is. I think all this stuff is common sense, but it still really helps to remember it. Sorry. So often, like just the other day, I was working on a song and I was getting frustrated that it was like, oh, this is the same old stupid John Madoff thing that I do on every song. Why can't I do something else? And I was getting down on myself. I was like, okay, well, I'm analyzing the song, but I'm not tweaking it. So if I shift my mindset over to tweaking, it'd be like, I started looking at the specific tracks that I was doing. It was like, oh, maybe I can like tweak the drum part a little bit and just get myself out of my comfort zone. And that opened up a whole new thing, which I have to work on later today. But just remembering that it's like, do, analyze, tweak, do, analyze, tweak. You have a website and you have a page and everybody's bouncing off that page. That's what's called the bounce rate, is like somebody goes to your album page and then they go away. What you want to do is you want to keep them on the website and make them look around and look at your other stuff, read your bio, sign up for your mailing list. So you just say, okay, my bounce rate's 90% on my album page. Okay, maybe if I put a mailing list sign up at the top of the page and say, hey, I'll give you a free single if you sign up for my mailing list. And then they go there and they go to the mailing list page. That's a tweak. Well, no, sorry. The analysis is the bounce rate is too high. The tweak is you put a mailing list thing at the top. You do that and then you analyze again. Oh, my bounce rate went down to 70% because they're going to the mailing list page now. When you have 2 pages in a user session, your bounce rate goes down. Okay. Now you may not care if somebody bounces after that. You may just want somebody to listen to your record. Great. But once you have your goals, do this cycle, do, analyze, tweak. And the old saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That's just the do part, and maybe even the analyze part. You got to tweak it a little bit and then go back. And then I just put, I like acronyms and mnemonic devices. So the DAT made me think of DAT tapes, which like I remember how cool it was the first time I saw a DAT player, digital audio tape. Whatever. Now we have Pro Tools and Logic and stuff, but that's just like, oh, you know, mini discs and all this you know, obsolete technology. Okay. Okay. Wow. It's 10:55 and I wanted to be here at 10:40 because I have OCD. I actually do. I'm not just like saying that, you know, colloquially, or whatever, but whatever. That's like too much self-disclosure. Okay. So I'm 15 minutes behind. That's not bad. So now we're going to get into the what. So this is a cute little Calvin and Hobbes cartoon that I found, which is like exactly like it's like the default for every creative person I know. You're just like walking around and you get an idea and you're like, oh, boom. And you're like in it and you're panicking. I got to do this. I got to do that. Fine. I understand that's how we create sometimes. We are who we are. But to shift gears a little bit, now, oh wait, sorry. I see somebody put something in the chat. Hopefully it's not saying, I can't hear you, slow down. Okay, Ayelet said yes. I don't know what you said yes to, but thank you. And sending love to you and your family in Montreal. And best of luck on your crowdfunding project, which we'll get to. Okay, so now we'll get into the what. Like I said, everybody's in a different situation. I have signed up for many workshops, listened to many podcasts, read many books that were like, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. The only way that you can come up with this is how you do it is to go through it yourself and pick from here and there. That's what I think. There's no one way to do it. There's no, you have to do these 9 steps, do these 9 things and you'll be successful. Forget that. But I am going to do one thing, which I didn't know when I was going to do. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to give a shout out to what I think is the best music business book now that you can get, the best single resource. And it's this right here. I keep it on my desk. It's, hopefully this is coming out the right way and not the wrong way, if you can see that. This guy, Ari Herstand, is a music business guru. Obviously, I'm not getting anything from plugging his book. And you can get most of this information for free if you just Google him. He's a musician and a music business guy. This book is in his second printing. I read the first printing 3 times. I wrote in it and highlighted it. I got the second printing of it. This is the best resource out there for independent musicians today. And I kind of see myself as like taking a lot of what he's teaching and whittling it down through my experience of being like, Rebecca told me not to use this word because it might not translate, but like I consider myself like a musical freak or a musical weirdo. Like, not to get too much into, I'm an Orthodox Jew and I play like avant-garde music. There are like literally 7 of us in the world and 3 of them are in my band. So like, I'm not saying that to self-criticize or self-aggrandize. I'm just saying the niche thing, the small audience, small community, that's where I feel at home. The outsiders and the freaks and the weirdos, like those are my people. Okay, for lack of a better word, I don't mean that in any offensive way. I'm just saying those are the people that I feel comfortable with. The people who are like are just weird and kind of off. Like that's me. That's how I feel. So wait, somebody left a comment, and I appreciate everybody leaving questions to the end. That's great. Yes, thank you, Rebecca. AriHerstand.com. And there's also Ari's Take. That's his blog. So like I said, he's talking to everybody. He's talking about like a small niche and stuff, but he has a lot of things in that book that, in my opinion, are great, but they don't really apply to musicians in like this niche kind of community. Oops, sorry. My computer is just telling me I have to update. I'm not going to do that right now. Okay, so let's get into it. And given that everybody is unique, everybody's situation is unique, small independent musicians, for lack of a better term, are unique, but there are nevertheless things that I think you should be doing and thinking about, and techniques that I found through my own experience to be helpful and a good approach. We're going to take all this stuff. Do, analyze, tweak. That's going to apply to everything. But There's also a lot of stuff that I think is really helpful in the what category, in the specific category. So let's go through digital distribution first. Maybe, yeah, I think I'm going to get as far through this as possible, and then we'll just pick up next week. Does that sound good? Okay, so I'm making a commitment to, not making a vow, I'm making a commitment to stop at 11:10, okay? I said it, and it's being recorded. I'm going to stop at 11:10. Let's go through this. Next time I'll review and we'll get to the end of what I think are the main areas. Okay, I'm just taking a breath and drinking a sip of coffee. One thing is that I, as a person, like I said, with my mental state being OCD, it's very easy for me to get overwhelmed. And I found that, like, as much as you can, try to whittle it down to what you can influence, what you can control. Don't worry about the other stuff. There's a million things out there, a million things you could be focusing on. Do your best to come up with a plan of attack and do it. But then just with everything else, the to-do list also, pick a to-do list, do it, see if it works, tweak it a little bit, but also trust yourself. I wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, I should be doing this or that. And I do this sometimes. I should close Chant Records. I should stop playing the guitar. I should be a drummer. I thought that the other day, like, I'm not going to do that. But you got to try to get away from that and just stick to the plan, okay? So, digital distribution. Most people listen to music digitally these days. People are asking about CDs and stuff. We're going to get to that. CDs are still relevant. Vinyl is relevant. Even cassettes, which I still can't believe why you would listen to a cassette. I know people are into that. I don't care. If you like it, that's great. We're going to talk about digital first because that's primary, okay? So the first thing with digital distributions, you have to think about your timeline. So many musicians just make albums and they throw it up on Bandcamp. The music might be great, but it goes nowhere. Think about a release timeline, okay? Whatever that means. It could be, I just threw this up, but then tell that story. I woke up in a fever dream and I wrote an album and recorded it in 4 hours, and I'm telling the story of, like, moving from this country to that country and my family and da-da-da, and I put the album up and here it is, boom. Okay, so that's a story, but generally you need to have a timeline. You need to plan ahead with what your timeline is, okay? We can talk more about that, but this being a survey, just have a timeline. Generally, I think it should be 2 to 3 months. You should start your release, like you should start doing things for your release after the album is recorded and mastered, or even a single. 2 to 3 months out, plan for the full release when it's really dropping, and then work backwards. We're going to get into this with Bandcamp because it's a huge, maybe the #1 place that digitally that we should be putting our music. It's the best, in my opinion. They need an 8 to 9 week lead time if you're going to pitch their editors on your release. It's got to be on their website as a draft, which we'll talk about what that is. It's got to be uploaded and on there 8 to 9 weeks ahead, or they're not going to see it. Not because they don't want to, because they don't have the time. Okay, so now looking at platforms, this is not music delivery platforms. This is digital distribution platforms, okay? And then I put some pictures of the music platforms. I think this is Tidal. I don't use Tidal, but maybe somebody does. I'm a Spotify user. I even pay them for it. I'm just going to tell you that right now. If you hate me and you want to drop off, I totally understand. I pay $15. My kids listen to it. I listen to it. I like it. I know they're evil and they're the devil. So be it. I find amazing music on there. The ECM catalog being on Spotify has, like, saved my life many times, making me calm down before I freak out. Or, okay, just going to say that. But if you hate it, that's fine. Tell that story. You hate Spotify and you're only going to put your music out on single copied cassettes. That's great if you want to do that. The platforms for putting your music out on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Google Play, all the millions of those stupid little logos that you see and you don't even know what they are. Deezer, I don't even know what that is, but it's always there. These are 3 of the big ones. You pay in some form, commission or flat fee. You upload your music and then they deliver it to Spotify and Apple. You can't put your music on Spotify directly. Okay, so people probably already know that, but if you don't, you can't just upload your music to Spotify. The good news here is that you can do it and then they deliver to everyone. And these are all pretty much the same. I have experience with the first 2. My label used DistroKid for a while. I'll tell you right now, if you're a single artist releasing only under your name, DistroKid is great because you can do like unlimited single artist releases for, I believe, a flat fee. That's what it was when I was doing it. It's like pretty low. I think it might be $50 a year. But once you start doing different artists, they charge you per artist. So it became very expensive very quickly. You know, thankfully Chant Records has a ton of artists. It was not economically feasible. I believe TuneCore works more or less the same way. CD Baby is another one. You can tell by their name. Used to be focused on CDs. Now they're a digital distribution platform. Do your homework, talk to people, pick the one that's good for you. These are all kind of like out of the box platforms. They have their rules. It's a little outside of what we're talking about now, but somebody in the comments of what they wanted to know about, I don't even know if they're on the call, talked about how do I release music from Israel to Europe? That's a great question. It's a very specific question. I don't know that much about that, but I do know we released a live album on Chant by Yemen Blues, which is a great band from Israel. I think probably many of its members have done asylum retreats and things like that. They're awesome. We put an album out, and Ravid, the lead singer, he writes his song titles in English, but they're Hebrew words, like big deal. You know, lots of people do that. Idan Rechel does that. Other people do that. But on DistroKid, you can't do transliteration. It's the stupidest thing. They're like, if it's in Hebrew, you have to write it in Hebrew characters. I was like, why? They wouldn't budge on that. So we had to tell them it was in some language that they didn't have on their platform. I found something that's like, oh, we don't have Hindi support yet. I was like, oh, guess what? It's in Hindi. And they're like, okay, you can do it. But nobody should have to jump through that hoop. There are little hacks like that, but no customer service person at DistroKid or TuneCore is going to help you customize. That's not what they do, okay? We now use a small boutique distributor that works with labels, and it's good because they work on commission. If you're a single artist releasing music and you don't mind this stupid transliteration thing, I would recommend DistroKid. It's good. They're reliable. They're small. Okay. Like I said, TuneCore and CD Baby are basically the same, but to release on Apple Music, iTunes, Spotify, all those other ones, you need one of these. Okay. Bandcamp, single best platform for independent music. And I think I'm probably going to go through this maybe a little more in depth the next time because I think it's so important. I'm sure many people are familiar with it. I can tell you the first thing. Wait, let me see what I put here. Oh, okay. So I didn't put the specifics of Bandcamp. And I think, you know what? Because I only have a few minutes, I'm going to spend the rest of the time today on Bandcamp. Then we'll pick up next week. Next week, we'll do a short review, go through the rest, and then we can get to some questions. I assume that sounds, hopefully that's good for everybody. If you have an objection, you can put it in the chat. But I'm going to have to ignore it. Sorry. But we'll get to it on the questions. You can criticize me. So Bandcamp is the single best platform. I can tell you based on my experience, again, I'm not trying to like self-aggrandize, you're probably not using everything they offer because they offer so many things. It's a built-in distribution platform, streaming, download, and editorial. People, I'm sure you know Bandcamp Daily, Bandcamp Weekly, different artist features. Their art, their drawing is amazing. Now, talking about storytelling, the story that Bandcamp tells is they care about and they support and they serve independent musicians. You go there and you're like, the top 10 recordings of the Japanese death metal played on period Baroque instruments scene in the northwestern suburb of Tokyo. And you're like, I thought I was weird. That's weird. And the stuff is great. And they have all that stuff you never heard of. And it's awesome because they really help artists find their audience and reach them. And like I said, I'm gonna do more on this next week. You know what I'm gonna do? Maybe after the chat, I'll put a link to a video that I made through Chant Records on YouTube that shows how to use their tagging system. Their tagging system is very specific and it's very useful and it will help get your music to more people, and almost nobody uses it correctly, which is weird. I think it's like I don't know. They just don't. If you do it correctly, more people will hear your music. It's not a trick. It's just a tool that you can use. But also on Bandcamp, and I know I said that I'm going to stop at 11:10. It's 11:09. Look, read their artist guide. Just Google Bandcamp Artist Guide and do everything that it says in the Artist Guide. Build up your profile, put a photo there, put a bio there, put links in there, put information about your albums. People want to know where it was recorded. They want to know who's playing bass. Don't just throw an album up there. Tell people about it. Make a nice cover image, or get a stock photo. Use everything that's there. Put out singles on Bandcamp. Put out compilations on Bandcamp. It's a great platform. And the people there, and this is what I'll leave you with, because this is we're going to get into a lot next week, people will pay for something that they could get for free, which is, those are the people you want to find. They'll pay to get a download of an album that they could listen for free on Spotify, and they could probably download it if they wanted to from like a free illegal site. They'll pay you because they want to support you, and they'll pay you because they want to be a part of your story. And people will even give you extra money because they value what you do. Okay, that was like a mouthful. So hopefully that was okay. I'm going to stop it there. If you want to, you have the link. You can go through the rest of what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about a little about other platforms, and then music delivery. We're going to get into that. I'm just going to, and then what we're going to go over next time. So we almost got all the way there. Okay, cool. So I'm going to turn off my screen share. Hopefully that was of value to people. And now, yeah.
John, thank you so much for all of that. I appreciate it. And I think the anecdotes are great. I have 2 questions in the chat I'm going to just throw out.
Yeah.
And then maybe if other people have questions, I can just unmute folks.
Awesome.
So the first question from Lotaro was, what's the difference between free and paid platforms?
Okay. Do you mean as far as us putting our music on there, or as a fan?
I have my 4 albums on Root Note, and when I did it, I just found that there were digital distribution platforms that were free and others you had to pay. So I didn't know what I was going to get by paying it, because I didn't know if they were going to put my music on playlists. So I don't know what's the difference. What's the...
And did you find that their distribution service was good?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. I actually wasn't aware of ones for free, but that is a good point that you bring up. In my experience, which is, obviously limited, it's good to get an inexpensive paid platform, because then they're responsible for delivering your music to the platforms. Spotify is notorious for, like, if your artist name is similar to another artist or the same, you might sometimes get listed incorrectly. So there has to be some accountability for going in and sending there's a specific name for the work. You can do it yourself in Spotify now, but distributors, I think, can do it quicker. They separate the 2 artists. So you're, this John Madoff and not that John Madoff. The other thing is, I have found that many platforms tell you they're going to pitch to playlists. If you're not paying them that much, especially if it's a flat fee, I don't really believe that they're doing that in any meaningful way. I've never gotten a playlist placement to be honest, I've never gotten a playlist placement from my boutique distributor who says that they're really helping me. I'm not saying that they are lying, but it's very hard to get that. So I would just count on them to deliver the music accurately and on the timeline that they promise. Mm-hmm. So don't pay that much. I mean, like, if it's more than $50 or $60 a year, find somebody else, because that's what most of them cost, in my opinion.
Thanks, John. The next question from Leah is, can you get royalties from Bandcamp streaming?
That is a good question. I do know that in Bandcamp, you put in the ISRC numbers for each song, which is the unique identifier. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know. And probably most of the reason I don't know is because the artists that I upload to Bandcamp from my label, they would see those royalties. I don't know. I have never seen significant performance royalties from there. Although I do know that I don't know where that revenue would come from, because fans are paying for downloads. They're not paying for any streaming, and there's no advertising on the site. My guess would be no. It might be small. I would look into that. I can look into that too. I'm gonna.
And I guess that IRSC number, Wait,
Yeah.
is that what you called it? Like, I don't really know so much about that, but I guess maybe you'll get to that in the next session with,
Yes.
like royalties and stuff.
Yes.
That's,
Well,
that's the biggest hole in my knowledge, is how to like tap that ASCAP.
yes. Yes. or that BMI, as the case may be.
Yeah.
It's simply a unique identifier for each song that allows performance royalties to be collected on that. And that is, my advice generally is like, do your homework so that you can get all the little sources of income from those things, because they do add up.
Right.
And put them on Bandcamp, things like that. Any good digital distributor will give you ISRC numbers, and you will see it. Like, it'll say, okay, your album is uploaded. Here it is. Click on the information page. Every song has an ISRC number. It should. I'm not aware of
from the label. Like the label would give that to me, or if it was a self-released thing.
A record label should give that to you. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, I give that to all my artists. I get it from my distributor. They just fill out a spreadsheet. Here are the ISRC numbers. You probably could sign up as a vendor to get your own. I've never done that. I would be wary of any site that offers that for free. I think my distributor pays a small fee for it. And then just because we're talking about it, the UPC number is for the album as a whole. The ISRC number is for the song. In singles and streaming world that we live in, the ISRC number is more important. But the UPC number is good also. That's usually used for sales, physical sales, but also iTunes album downloads.
Cool. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anyone want to, okay, Mark, I'll unmute you. You had a question. Cool.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm working on a project and I have a collaborator, and we were talking about crowdfunding to pay for our studio time and things like that. And then of course the plague hit. And so we had a spirited discussion on whether it's appropriate to ask our fans for money at this time, particularly because the members of the group, this is not our main gig. We're all actually doing okay because, you know, we're not struggling, and a lot of people are, and a lot of our fans are. By the same token, there are people out there that really want to support the arts, and they believe in what we do, and maybe not everybody can participate, but a lot of people have a lot of money and they want to. So I was curious your thoughts. Doing crowdfunding in a time of, you know, in a time of stress.
Yep, that's a great question. I'm going to cover crowdfunding and my thoughts on it. I've done 3 crowdfunding campaigns on 2 different platforms. My short answer is yes. And I probably last week, before last Friday, I would have said I don't know. And of course I hear what you're saying. When I saw how much money Bandcamp raised from people, I was like, people want to help. And what crowdfunding does is it, like, we always think of like, we don't want to pay, like, just, you know, you want to conserve your resources and you don't want to pay. There are a lot of people out there that consider you're helping them by allowing them to pay you to do what you do. And that took me, I didn't understand that until I did crowdfunding. Like, somebody who I never know gave me $500. I was like, what is wrong with you? But he thanked me for doing the work and saying, I'm so glad I can contribute, because he knew that I didn't have that $500 before he gave it to me. So I would say yes, but maybe acknowledge that and say, like, for anybody who can't pay, once the album is released, we're going to put it out for free in 3 months. So wait on that. Or like email, or like maybe you could even say, sign up for our mailing list. And if you can't pay, we're going to send you a single just for signing up for nothing. So take the barrier to entry away for them, but also allow people to support you. And I would bet that there are people who really do want to support you right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just in the chat, just so you know, Tom wrote, I think you were referring to Bandcamp, that they don't pay royalties as far as he knows. So thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. Kyle wrote that. Tom wrote something else. Sorry. Okay. What else? Redistribute to full-time artists or charities if you can afford it. That's great. Yes. Anything else? I can use, if you want, I can use the last 10 minutes to just go through the other distribution platforms because it's small.
Sure. Why don't you do that?
Okay.
Okay. Because I bet at the end we'll have even more questions. So we can take some time next week too.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And if people have questions, just interrupt it in the chat because this is kind of a minor thing. Wait, I have to show my screen again, right? Sharing, and now, here we go. Sorry. You can see that? Okay. So I have to put my chat window over here. Okay, so digital distribution. So these other platforms. This is something that changes all the time. Quite recently, most kids, I'm saying anybody under 20, YouTube for a long time was the #1 music streaming platform. And when I read that, I was like, that's a typo. It's a video platform. No, people listen to music on there. Everybody knows that if you can't find something on Spotify, it's probably on YouTube. And I do that. I'm guilty of it. I listen to a lot of records on YouTube that I probably shouldn't be giving those people their video views, but I want some like some obscure Os Mutantes, like live album. It's there. Believe me. YouTube says that they're protecting us and our intellectual property. They may be a little bit, but it's on there. So my advice is put your music on YouTube. Put a little link at the bottom for people to support you, because if you have fans somewhere down the line, your music is going to end up there. Hopefully, Leah mentioned like a label. Most labels and distributors have a deal where if your music is detected by their algorithm, they'll actually push any advertising royalties to you, which is great. My royalty statements have YouTube on it. It's never that much money. But I would say just put your music on there. Even if just put the album cover and the name, put the songs on there, and then put a link in the bottom for people to sign up for your mailing list. You might as well. If you don't want to, that's fine. But just the likelihood that somebody's going to put your music up there is pretty high. Also, SoundCloud. SoundCloud for years is like, we're going to shut down next week. We're going to shut down next month. It's like they're always saying they're going to close, or there's always some industry thing. They're still around. I don't think probably for most people on here, it's that super useful. I think remixes of popular songs are really popular on SoundCloud. Other things, DJ things. One thing SoundCloud is good for is that a lot of blogs like to embed from SoundCloud because they have a very clean, we'll talk about this when we talk about websites, but they have a very clean embed function. If you have a WordPress website, all you have to do is put the actual URL, no code or anything, and it will automatically make what's called an O embed, which is just an automatic embed that shows up. I used to use it. Bandcamp saw that they had that and they caught up. So now Bandcamp has good embedding. I would suggest using Bandcamp because they're better than SoundCloud, but SoundCloud is still good. My label pays for a $150 pro membership on SoundCloud. It's on my to-do list to like stop paying them because I don't really think it's worth it. But they are out there. They're a digital music distributor. They have good things about them. You may find them useful. Okay, I saw one thing come in because the next thing I was going to talk about music delivery, which we should wait, but hold on. Chat. David, freelance artist resource guide. Great. I assume that's something that's happening in the current environment. Also, because that reminded me of it, Ari Herstan, if you look at his blog, Ari's Take, I just saw the email, I didn't look at it, but he had like 9 ways that musicians can make income during, this time now when everybody's gigs are canceled and everything. There's definitely some useful things on there. You've probably seen people doing it. You can do a Facebook Live with a tip jar. There might be other paid platforms where the payment is default in it, but you can set up a PayPal page or Venmo, do a concert. That's only the beginning. I know a lot of people are doing that now. Okay, so I'm going to stop showing my screen again. Are there any other questions, comments, feedback on this? What was this? I hope this was helpful so far. Like I said, next week we're going to go into more into the what of it. I can tell you right now, unless there are other questions, we have 5 minutes left. I didn't think I was going to come in ahead of time. That never happens.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
So I think, we talked a little bit about crowdsourcing and, the Bandcamp thing. And I think that right now is a time when everyone is being to be philanthropic. But I'm kind of interested in, we don't know how many months it's going to be until we can go back out on the road. And we don't know exactly like the full span of this. So I'm trying to think strategically in terms of time. Like, I mean, right now, this month, there are people who still have their jobs, but in 6 months, who knows? So I feel like I don't want to depend too much on that crowdsourcing thing, because that's not a good long-term strategy.
Right. I hear it. I mean, especially for somebody who's a performing musician and making money through concerts. I mean, I guess the reply to that could be, well, you could switch to focusing on recordings and have that be your long-term strategy. That's much easier said than done, I'm sure. Yeah. Sorry, you're on mute. I couldn't hear you.
I mean, that's definitely part of it. But I think that by that same token, people are going to be it'll be less possible for people to purchase music.
I see what you're saying. Yes.
No?
Yes, of course. Of course. I mean, gosh, like if the economy tanks, it's.
No, I mean, when the economy tanks.
When the economy tanks. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. And for that, I don't know. I don't know. Because, one thing I've said to some musician friends is like, I've never been more thankful to have a day job, and that's not to rub anything in the face of anybody, but I learned
I get
very
it.
quickly that my day job is, that security is not a given there as well. Because, I work for a nonprofit, so like they rely on funders, and that funding is not, nobody will escape that. I think, especially people who are not independently wealthy, which probably includes all of us, as anyway. But
I guess what I'm trying to get at is
yeah.
Talking about like long-term strategies in terms of unionization of freelance musicians and cultural workers. The idea that like we are all cultural workers in some sense, and so we're tied to this like gig economy, and we have no place at the bargaining table because we're not unionized. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like that is sort of an idea that I just want to put out there to everybody in terms of like long-term advocacy. Yeah, I mean, that's cool that the 802 has been mobilizing, but I don't know, like, there's a lot of like difficulty with that because of like everybody's coming from different places with their musical backgrounds and their musical practices. I don't play in an orchestra.
Right. So maybe there's a place from.
I'm not that kind of musician, is what I'm saying.
Right. No. Me neither. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe
there's kind of like put that out there for food for thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe there's a place for like a new type of musicians union. That's what you're talking about. A new model, just like we have all these new models. There was something, I can't remember if somebody is on the mailing list. I'm going to look on my phone right now. I got an email from, I think it's called, gosh, I'm not going to find it because I have so many emails in here. Like the Music Creators Alliance. I think they used to be Artist Rights Alliance. Artist Rights Alliance. It's this. You can Google it. I don't really know what they're doing, but it seemed like they're trying to address this. This may have grown out of the, gosh, I think it was called the CCC, the Creative Something Collective. Mark Rebo was involved in.
Yeah, I just got an email from Mark Rebo.
Yeah. So I would maybe look at what he's doing, because his thing was like making streaming fair, which he was Content Creators Coalition. Awesome. Yes. This may have, the Artist Rights Alliance may have something to do with that. I'm not sure, but I would look into what they're doing. A friend of mine, Sarah Manning, who's a composer and saxophone player, is involved with that. Yeah, that could be, really great. Okay, I know we have to go in a minute, but sorry, was there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I don't know if you guys all saw this, and it's a pretty small amount of money, but there's something from New Music USA. They're calling it the New Music Solidarity Fund. It's they have about $130,000 at this point, and it's for emergency funding. I'm going to put it in the I'll put it in. I mean, it's basically for folks who play the music of living artists, which feels like everyone here. So that's just something that came up today. And, you know, I want to just say, because we're sort of have an international outlook, that it's like particularly bad here for artists in the United States, right? This is just this is where a lack of state infrastructure and federal infrastructure for funding, and frankly for freelance workers, and the combination is like particularly painful. So that's just something to also kind of remember based on our reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it would be great to hear from maybe somebody in Europe who has an idea of what the forecast is for those, for that infrastructure that exists in those places. I'm not aware of it, only from having played in Europe. And I'm like, where'd you get the money for this festival? And they're like, the government. I was like, oh, that's funny. The government didn't give me anything of my country, you know? So great. I know every place is different. Not saying it's easy for artists anywhere, but it's a different model, to say the least.
John, we're at our time, and I want to just respect everyone's time. John, thank you so much. That was a great first beginning, and it was nice, really nice to see everyone's faces, people and new musicians and artists. So we're going to do this at the same time, Eastern time. Europe and Israel has a time difference change in between now and the next one. And if you have any other questions, you can either email me and I'll pass them on to John, or you can email John directly so we can make sure this is serving you, and any feedback you can send to one of us.
Yep, and I'm putting my email address in the chat. Yes, and next time I'm going to compile a kind of a list of resources and links that I'll send to everybody, and then we'll go from there with next week's talk.
Great. And I'll send a recording too. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we'll post this and we'll do it next week. So thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and looking forward to next week. Be well. Thank you.